Today, I will be talking about relational trauma and happiness with Stephenie Zamora, coach and author of Unravel from New Mexico, USA. Hello, Stephenie, and very welcome to our Open to Happiness podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. It's lovely to have you here. And I'm excited to talk with you about your life experience, your journey through healing, through trauma and healing. Where shall we start? Let's start with what is happiness to you?
I think happiness to me is really the ability to be myself and to flow freely how I want. I really love, for example, I really love to write. I really love nature, and to be able to do those things just brings me a lot of joy. And it can be very simple. It doesn't have to be these epic trips around the world or even publishing a book. It's just being able to do those things that we love. For me, that's definitely happiness.
I can subscribe to that, feeling free and liberated from any constraints, just being ourselves.
Yes.
Sounds like peacefulness and happiness, isn't it? Good. What was your relationship with happiness? Have you always been happy as far as you remember yourself?
No, definitely not. I was a very angsty child and teenager, and definitely spent a lot of my life depressed. Very much so when I was younger. I poorly, but attempted suicide. They considered putting me on antidepressants, but I remember feeling very confident for myself that it wasn't anything that could be treated with anything other than lifestyle change. Like, I knew very young that I was different. I was one of those people who felt like they were born on the wrong planet at the wrong time, like just didn't belong, couldn't find my place. And I I wrestled with that throughout my whole life, like trying to find my way in this world that didn't make sense to me. And so depression was a constant companion. And to be totally honest, I'm a very light, happy person. I feel like people reflect that to me quite often. Like, they'll say, "Oh, you just glow, you just sparkle, like your just smile lights up the room." And I find that even to this day so odd, because I know that I'm a happy person. I know that I have found a way to love this life, but I also feel like a very dark and twisty person, in that I can hold the harder aspects and the more challenging aspects, partly because of my personality type, but partly I think because I spent so long feeling depressed. And it's not that I want to be there, I want to go back there, but I have found a certain comfort in riding the different waves throughout life. Like, I'll still have little bouts of depression that are always assigned to me, that I'm not doing what I want to be doing, that I feel constrained, that I'm feeling trapped or frustrated or unfulfilled. And so I see it as a guide. But yeah, I kind of walk that line where I know the parts of me that are bright and shiny and happy, those come from being able to sit with and work with like the heavier, harder aspect.
Thank you so much for sharing. Can we then find out a bit more about your own journey? What brought you into those, I don't know, tunnels of darkness and depression?
Yeah. I mean, again, when I was younger, it was really not knowing myself, not understanding what made me different. And we're all different in different ways. But when we have a different personality or a way of being, or we just think differently, like that, it was a constant pain point for me when I was younger. But as I got older, like many of us, I started to experience more losses and traumas. And to give a little bit of context, 2014, I had worked really hard up until that point to just get my life in a place where I was really happy. I was really happy with myself. I was the healthiest I had ever been. My business was thriving at the time. I had a great team. I was like projected for great income for months out. I loved what I was doing. I loved where I lived. And the only thing that wasn't working for me was my relationship at the time. And I had been with him for a couple of years, but as time went on, it started to feel more codependent. I felt smothered. He had been more manipulative and controlling, and we weren't the right fit for each other. And so I ended that relationship at the end of 2014, and he started showing up, basically stalking me for a couple of weeks, and I had to be very clear and ask him to leave me alone, to not come around anymore. And in clearness, I turned cold because I didn't know I felt like if I gave any warmth, if I said, I still care about you, if I hope we can be friends one day, like it would be something that would keep him hooked in. And he ended up committing suicide a couple of days later, um, after that last conversation, which just absolutely flattened me. I had experienced minor to me losses when I was younger, like a pet, grandparent. And I know that those can be very massive losses for a lot of people, but for me as a kid, it was, they compared to what I was then going through, they felt much more minor. And this just destroyed my sense of self. I, of course, blamed myself. I felt guilt and shame. I had pretty bad PTSD, which I didn't know that you could get from sudden bereavement and traumatic loss. My PTSD was so bad that I would drive in circles around my house because in the time it took the block, I would forget that I was going home. I couldn't tell you who half my clients were. Some of them had even been with me for years. I would lose moments. I couldn't tell you what I did the day before. I couldn't put my life story in order. Like my PTSD was very bad. And because of that PTSD, because I couldn't make sense of what was going on, I walked right into a abusive relationship with a drug addict who I believed was the love of my life. And that was a very tumultuous, awful relationship. And so 3 years after my loss is when I was finally free of that relationship, and I was really starting to heal. And I got hit with just so many physical symptoms from everything I had been through. I had dysphagia, which is the inability to swallow. I couldn't eat or drink for 9 days. I choked on my own saliva. It was like a year before I could eat and drink normally. I had debilitating panic attacks, adrenal fatigue. I ended up filing bankruptcy. Like I just went through all of this stuff, like the longest, most epic for me, dark night of the soul, that really just destroyed me was the best way to put it. After all of that, after the abusive relationship, after the health issues, I felt like a shell of a person. I felt just utterly worthless. Like I had no value. I didn't deserve anything good. And even though I started to pick up the pieces of my life slowly, like that guilt, the shame, the feeling like I didn't deserve anything good, feeling like just a worthless piece of crap, it really affected me. And even though I started to make steps upwards, I got my finances back in order. I, was rebuilding my business. I got into a different, better relationship. It was all still like I had been before his death on this trajectory of things just getting better and more aligned. And I didn't realize how far I had fallen with his death, with the abusive relationship, with everything that happened. And so I was taking these steps up that were still so far below where I had been before. And it really took me a while to realize I'm still operating from really low self-worth. I'm still depressed. I still have more of the trauma to heal and process through. And yeah, that was a season.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really sorry to hear about the loss and how brutal it
Yeah.
ended really with your previous boyfriend. Um, and I can understand why you manifested so much trauma responses as you went through all of this, because it looks like you've been in a quite low energetic space and
Yeah.
you attracted a lot of negativity. Was there any childhood trauma prior to this unhappy relationship that really shook you down?
Yeah, nothing major, like nothing huge, but my relationship with one of my parents was very, they didn't have emotional availability. They could be very verbally and emotionally abusive, manipulative, gaslighting. Like it's not anymore, but it throughout my life has been very easy to gaslight me because that was such a constant in my life. And that was kind of perpetual. And my parents went through a divorce, got new step parents. Like I have a couple of sisters and some step siblings, and we kind of eventually all ended up in different places. And so I talk actually with my partner now about how I don't experience abandonment the way that it sounds like many people do, because abandonment just was like the norm.
Yeah.
There were times I lived at one house and that parent was never home, like never saw them, took fended for myself, even though they had a good job. there would be like no food in the house, like just these little things that I didn't think were abnormal at the time. Obviously, we don't know any better when we're younger. It's just our
Yeah.
reality that I can look back now and be like, that particular parental relationship definitely shaped my wounds, definitely shaped my choices and partners, and the ways that I responded to things definitely made me more susceptible to gaslighting, to low self-worth, to tolerating abusive behaviors, because I thought that's just like, that's how people love, So I, there wasn't any big defining traumatic moments. It was like these constant traumas and constant manipulation that was just kind of like baked into some of those experiences and relationships.
Yes, because very often when we have these early adversities, they leave behind all sorts of injuries on our psyche that make it
Yeah.
so easy for unhealthy relationships to just kick in. And no wonder, obviously, you found yourself stalked by the first boyfriend and then in a relationship with a drug addict. Perhaps a part of you didn't feel deserving of more because of the
Yeah,
neglect in the childhood.
yeah. And I can look at that now and see how trauma played a role, how low self-worth shaped my choices for about 5 years after that loss.
Yeah,
Like, when you carry that level of guilt and shame, even despite having conversations with his parents and his friends and us all making peace and really intellectually understanding that that was not my fault, I was a piece of a collection of things that really led to that decision. Like, that initial shame and guilt and blame that we feel, like, it just roots in there, and it takes time to really untangle.
yeah. It must have been hard for you,
Yes.
one after the other. So, what was the breakthrough moment when you awakened enough after navigating through so much pain and suffering and said, "That's it. It needs to stop now. I need to make a change."
Yeah, I love this question because it was a couple of relationships that I had later and the ways that they went. And I would have told you each year after I left the abusive relationship that that was my turning point. That was, I was doing better. I was making better choices, but it wasn't actually until, so I was in the abusive relationship for about a year and a half. The year after that, actually a year and a half later, I decided to move myself to the mountains to get out of my community. I just wanted to be in nature more. I felt like I needed to be in more isolating and challenging situations and just be able to hear myself again versus having everyone around me who had an opinion. And so I moved myself to the mountains, and I got into a relationship with a lovely human, not a abusive, manipulative bone in his body, but who was extremely emotionally and like literally unavailable. And that felt very safe to me, quite honestly, after being in a relationship where there was two relationships where there was control and manipulation and different forms of abuse and bad things. It was very safe to be with somebody who just naturally had more distance in the way that they related, and was in that relationship kind of off and on for a couple of years, which was the first time I really experienced abandonment wounds, because they were so very unavailable, and it felt like we never really formed as like a unit and a partnership. And after that relationship, I actually very randomly felt compelled to look through old emails from an old relationship before all the chaos, the last relationship I had before, the two bad ones. And I remember reading through them and being like, wow, that was my healthiest relationship. And it wasn't from a place of like the one that got away, I wish I could go back. It was like, I really was able to see that I had worked so hard on myself, that I was making everywhere but in relationships much better choices for myself. And that's when I was able to see that the relationship that I had just ended, the 2.5-year relationship with the person who was unavailable, I thought that was such a big step up after the suicide loss, the abusive relationship. But I was able to see it as, it was a step up, but it wasn't a step up on the upward trend I had been on. It was after like crashing and burning and being in the gutter, I like stepped up to the curb, like it was this perspective shift. And shortly after that relationship ended, I kind of unintentionally ended up in a romantic thing with a longtime friend. And that was like the most absurd experience I had ever been in terms of knowing someone for a very long time and then having a completely different experience romantically that was not okay in any sense of the word. And I was so, it was so absurd to me that when it finally ended, I remember actually like we had been on a video call closing the laptop and it felt like I snapped out of a fog. And I was just like done with all of that. Done. And I could feel it in a way that I had never felt it before. So it was like the combination of those two things. And I just like set it behind me. And I want to add to that for anyone who's like, oh, just one day you'll be like, boom, I'm done. I also did a lot of healing work leading up to that point, like through all of this. So it wasn't just like a magical, all of a sudden I decided, like there was a lot that built in that direction. But I don't know, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, where I was like, that was so ridiculous that I'm not even going to be traumatized by it. I'm just going to be done with all of that. And I started living my life differently. I started embracing more of who I was. I started trying to organize myself around the life that I wanted. I bought a camper as a tiny home, moved back home to New Mexico, made all these shifts in my work and my business, and got happier and healthier. But yeah, it was like this combo, like 1-2 punch of absurdity and like recognizing, okay, wow, I really fell far. And that's why I thought that was such a big step up, but it was still really like a really low, not great experience that just kind of like woke me up.
That's great. Well, sometimes we really need a shock to wake up us, isn't it? We need to
Yes.
go through this journey of suffering and pain and bad choices. It's a way of figuring out what we want, what is good for us. And it's unpleasant when we look back, but sometimes you need to be able to stay in the darkness for a while to appreciate the light and the
Yeah.
gorgeousness out there. What was the impact of this relational trauma on you that started obviously early in the childhood with the dynamic, with the patterns in your family environment, and then choosing somehow inappropriate partners that didn't really make you feel loved, maybe safe, seen, considered, appreciated, and so on? What was the impact, would you say,
Yeah.
on your mental state, on your
I
uh,
mean, it was,
joyfulness as well?
yeah, it was huge in so many ways that I couldn't see until after that kind of 1-2 punch awakening of that my self-worth had always been low, that I am extremely hypervigilant, which is a blessing and a curse. Like I am so attuned to people. I always liken it to like, we can all usually feel when the pilot slows an airplane down, like we feel that subtle shift in energy. And my hypervigilance is like, I'll know the second before he realizes he needs to slow the plane down. Like it's ridiculous how hypervigilant I am. And I can see that that came from childhood. Staying small, staying quiet, staying safe. I have dealt with a lot of self-doubt. It was really easy to undermine my sense of self and my sense of knowing something, like my sense of what's true and right for me because of all the gaslighting, because I spent most of my childhood feeling like I was wrong and I didn't fit in and I was broken, and having that kind of reinforced through different situations and behaviors. And my self-worth, like even though I had worked really hard on it leading up to the suicide loss, it was always low because it was tied to how the men in my life or the people in my life or my family or my friends saw and treated me. And I really had formed, and we all have a subconscious winning strategy that is like our way of staying safe, secure, successful, and getting love and belonging in life, which subconsciously that signals that we're safe, that we're going to be okay. Like mine had very much become being what others wanted and needed me to be. They didn't have to tell me what that was. I could intuit it with my hypervigilance, but I had abandoned myself over and over and over again. And there were some ways where I didn't. Like my work has always been a place where I've been able to show up and be who I'm here to be to a degree. But even in that, like it was very easy to undermine me. to question me, to doubt me, to be like, why are you doing it that way? Or it'd be better if you did this. And so it cost me so much of my life. And yes, I learned and I grew, and there's beautiful gifts from everything that I went through, but it also cost me a lot of time. And that was the thing that really shifted after that 1-2 punch was done. Like, I'm living life for me. And if I'm going to be partnered, it's going to be with somebody whose life fits alongside or with mine. Like, no more being who I think I need to be chosen by somebody who doesn't deserve like any access to me or my life and is going to treat me poorly. Like, I'm going to live the life that I want to live. And the life that I want to live is owning land and homesteading and like not living a conventional life. And in doing that and doing that healing work and choosing myself and organizing my life around who I want to be, I met the most wonderful partner, completely different than anyone I've ever been with, a completely different relationship dynamic, like something I never could have imagined that I would be able to have. And I really attribute that to my healing, of course, but also stopping that age-old impact of my relationship trauma of contorting myself for the wrong people.
It's so beautiful to listen to you and the journey you've been through. You describe the post-traumatic growth so easily and so clearly. I'm really, really happy that you managed to come out of this. And then
Thank you.
suddenly, with the changes that happen naturally within you, you managed to notice and observe the man that was right for you. And you're now in a happy relationship.
Yeah.
Really, really chuffed for you. So now you're going through all of this journey, and at some point, you decide you want to share your learnings and you want to inspire others to maybe believe in themselves when they are about to doubt themselves completely. Maybe they gain a sense of trust in the humanity as well after they've been hurt by others. How did you really find your way towards the helping professions? What made you feel that you would love to maybe guide others into their healing journey? If you want to share a little bit how everything started and where are you today in your coaching work?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's been for me very organic. So my background is actually in graphic design, and to this day, there's still an agency design component to my companies. But I started as a graphic designer, started a graphic design firm with one of my ex-boyfriends who was also a designer. And in around 2011, realized that I wanted to work with more purpose-driven, like solopreneurs and companies. And my ex-partner, both in work and life, he was really drawn towards like the bigger names, the flashier brands. And so it was this natural split within our business before we ended up splitting, as a couple. And I started working with more solopreneurs. I got into the online marketing world. I myself felt like I was going through the quarter life crisis, which happened kind of young for me, this questioning of, okay, I don't really know what I want in life. And I think that even though I'm talented at design and I've built successful businesses, like I don't know that that's what I'm here to do. And so purpose became an even louder question for me. I always say that purpose is my purpose, and it has been forever. Like I have always questioned, I have always been existential. I've always wondered what the point of life is. And so this became a louder evolution of that, is to just be like, why am I here? And am I really doing what I'm here to do? And realizing that design felt like a tool to do greater work in the world, not the thing that I was supposed to be doing. And just dove into the world of personal development, which I hadn't known was a thing earlier on. I wish I had, that there were coaches and books and programs and websites all about growth and healing, and started to dive into that world. I joined a business mastermind and just began writing about what I was going through, and writing with the intention of, I don't know, helping anyone else who might be in the same boat. And it evolved from there. Like I was writing about my experience going through the quarter life crisis and figuring out what my purpose was and building a business that felt like built around my passion. And then I got the hit for an online program. And it was my first program I ever ran, Foundations for Unshakable Joy, that was based on everything I had learned. And I remember at the time I was in a very expensive mastermind with a very, very expensive business coach who told me not to create it. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't sell. And I listened to her because, again, it was kind of easy to undermine me. But I couldn't ignore it. Like, it wanted to come through me. And I learned something that I'll continue to learn for the rest of my life, that if something wants to move through me, it's got to come out or it's going to kill me, which I think is very true for most creatives. And so I created that program and I launched it as a PDF to a small group and started doing a little bit of coaching. And those people who went through the program or who coached with me or who followed along became very entrepreneurial. And because they became entrepreneurial and I had built a couple of successful businesses, they asked me if I would coach them. So I started coaching on business. I created a business building program, all from stuff that I learned, all bringing in my branding and marketing experience. And after I went through the traumatic loss, I learned so much more than I ever wanted to know about healing and finding wholeness after challenging chapters and big life transitions. And it naturally influenced my work to start incorporating more about trauma and healing and grief and loss. And as I've learned and grown more about systems and subconscious programming and how we make the impossible happen, like all of that has influenced my work. And so it's been really organic, but it's also it's been in some ways forced upon me. Like my book Unravel, I didn't ever decide really to write it. It just kind of started happening. And a lot of what I've created has been that way. Like there are things that I'm working to create now and books that I need to write that it's like they're in there bubbling around, having their little conversations, and they just need to come out. And so it's been very natural for me and I love it being so dark and twisty. Like I'm very comfortable when people are at the bottom of their bottom, when they're dealing with mental health issues, when they're going through grief and trauma. Like those are my people. And I really believe that when we are our most broken and beaten down, we are the closest to everything that we want. Like we are right there. We just don't know that. And we're fighting to get back to where we were, back to the life that we had that probably wasn't aligned for us or just felt safe and comfortable. And so that's just where I love to be. And I love this work and I love talking about it. And I love seeing people step into their fullest expression, whatever that might be. That does not have to just be business. It doesn't have to be creative. It, like when people are showing up as who they're here to be, they're just inherent to existing, contributing to the world. And I think it's so special to see that happen. And I love that I get to be a part of it.
Wonderful. So empowering and really, really well articulated. What would be your core message at the core of your maybe courses? Maybe you write about it in your book Unravel. And how do we actually reach wholeness? How do we heal our relational trauma?
Yeah, my number one thing is knowing yourself, like really knowing yourself, knowing your personality type, your energetics, how to work with and around and outside of the confines of those things, understanding your wiring, understanding your subconscious programming, your wounds, your traumas, your purpose, your calling. Like, who are you here to be? What drives you? What inspires you? Because the more that we know ourselves, the more anchored we can stay in ourselves, especially when it comes to relational trauma. And even if we get lost, the more easily we can come back to ourselves and the more steady we can stand inside of the systems and the craziness of the world and other people crashing into us and grief and loss, and the more joy and happiness we can experience, and to be able to discern what's right and wrong for us and to trust ourselves, we have to know ourselves. And so that's like the first piece of work that is in everything, coming into alignment, understanding yourself. We're always in alignment. The question is with what? And so we want to come into alignment with our truth and what's right for us. And in terms of healing, I'm a really big advocate for process work and subconscious reprogramming. And there's so many modalities. So find the one that's right for you. But I think what happens is we often intellectualize our healing, especially if we're a more logical personality type. We think about it, we deconstruct it, we understand it. And that gives us a bit of leverage to move differently, to be differently, to release some of the pain, to make sense of things in a way that lets us move forward. But trauma and emotions and grief are stored in our cells and our bones and our tissues. And to really heal that, we have to process it out. And that can look so many different ways. Some people shake and they're releasing trauma. Some people cry or scream. Sometimes my favorite form of process work is kind of like a guided visualization where you empty out all the things that couldn't be said. You feel it, you wail, you move, like whatever you need to do until you can reach forgiveness for yourself, whether that's with yourself or with other people. And acupressure is my favorite way of repatterning. We work with the vision center and the oldest part of the brain, but there are, again, journaling can be a form of processing, but it can still be intellectual. So anything that you can do to like move it out of your cells. And to do that, we have to have a relationship with our emotions. And the more that we do this work and the more that we have a relationship to our emotions, the more we can process in real time. So next time you're sad or experiencing trauma or whatever it is, like you feel more free to just cry, to scream into your pillow, to flail about, or whatever you need to do versus stuffing it down and trying to be strong and trying to just power through it, because that stays in our cells and it makes all of these other experiences that we have more charged, because we're not just responding to the pain or the trauma or the emotion of the moment. It's like everything comes up from the past. And so process work has given me and my clients and my partner and my friends like the most leverage, because all the old stuff isn't in your cells anymore. And then you're way more comfortable just processing in real time. And again, intellectualizing has its place and its power, but if you're not somatically working with healing, then you're only doing one small part of the equation.
True, somatic work is important, but also working on the mind and the soul as well, including all of these beautiful parts of us into the process. Is this what you're writing about in the book Unravel, or it's a bit more?
Unravel really details everything I went through, the traumatic loss, the abusive relationship, the health issues, basically hitting my bottom and what it took to really rise up and come back. And a lot of the work that I do, the conversations that I have around healing from challenging chapters and big life transitions is based semi-loosely on the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And so it walks you through my story while also weaving in all the lessons that I learned about healing and growth. And again, yes, I decided to actually write it and put it out, but it started coming out of me very quickly after my loss. And I was very uncomfortable with the idea of sharing it, because there's things that we do in grief and trauma that are out of character for us or that won't make sense to other people, but were perfect for what we needed to do. And there was a lot of those moments in my journey. And the reason that I wrote that book and put it out was that I want people to understand that healing is not linear. And there is no one right path and no one right way to heal. And sometimes things have to get a lot worse before they get better. Not always. One of my mentors said to me when I was really in the thick of it, what if you raised rock bottom to meet you where you're at so that you can just get better from here? And it's like, that's a lovely idea. And sometimes that works to decide, this is it, this is my bottom. And there are other times that we can't really start to heal if we don't actively bottom out. And to actively bottom out, we have to choose to go into what's hard and what hurts. We have to choose to break our own hearts, like Cheryl Strayed says. Like, we have to choose to go into healing processes that are going to rip us open before we can start to feel better. Like, healing is and can be very beautiful and expansive and magical and synchronistic. And there are a lot of times that it's ugly and messy, and we're just swirling around in the chaos of it. And I wanted to show people that my journey was like that. And so if your journey is like that, or is worse in some ways, or more crazy, or you're doing things that are out of character, like, you're all right. You know, you're on your journey and your path to healing, and it doesn't have to look a certain way. And it doesn't always go at the pace that we want it to. And yeah, just peeling back the curtain and sharing, because I know that other people sharing their journeys and stories, whether it's on podcasts or books or wherever, helped me tremendously. And I think the more that we share our stories, the more likely we are to feel less alone.
It can be bumpy, but let's embrace this journey, because it's full of teachings, it's full of gifts, We just need to open our eyes and our hearts and accept it as part of our life. Is there happiness beyond relational trauma in your view?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're really willing to do the work, which looks different for each of us, there absolutely is. I am the happiest I have ever been. And truth be told, in this moment, I'm dealing with a lot of health issues, but I'm happier than I've ever been. I feel safer and more supported than I ever have. I feel more like me than I ever have in my life. And I have an incredible partnership, like I said, and that's not to brag. I feel like it's so important because I didn't believe I could have this. Like I hoped for it. I did the work to be the kind of woman that I wanted to be in that type of partnership, but I wasn't banking on it. I wasn't waiting around for it. I wasn't even heavily looking for it. And to be in it now feels like such a beautiful affirmation of the work that I did, the work that he did, the journeys that we've been on. And, he's had his own relational trauma. And some of that stuff still comes up for both of us being in a relationship, especially when you've been in bad ones and when you're in a healthy one. It's like suddenly there's a whole new slew of things to like navigate because you're not used to being able to feel safe, being able to just be happy. And so, yeah, beyond other relationships, like I've had a tremendous amount of relational trauma, in some ways way worse than others and barely anything compared to someone else. But if we're willing to do that work, to really get to know ourselves and what it is that we want, to really heal through and find forgiveness, not to excuse other people, but to set ourselves free from it and to rewire all of the ways of being that we've developed and subconscious strategies to stay safe so that we can just be who we're here to be. Then we get to create the life that we're here to live and have the friends that we're here to have and do the things that we love and meet the right people. And it's not easy work. So anyone who's going through it, my heart is with you. It can truly feel impossible at times. And we can have these deep rooted attachment wounds and trauma responses that we really think like, I'm never going to be free of that. And you can be. I'm evidence of that. My partner is evidence of that. And we continue to do our work. And it's worth it. I know it can feel really dark and heavy, but it's absolutely worth trudging through, clawing your way through whatever you need to do to get to this other side.
I'm so happy for you that you are in a good space now with a happy partner next to you in a couple relationship that is healthy and giving. It's an amazing story. Towards the end of our podcast, Stephenie, what are your best 3 teachings in life to live a happy, fulfilling, and joyful existence?
Know yourself and trust yourself. Like you are the only person who can know what's right for you in any situation. You are the only person who can discern. So having that relationship to yourself and trusting yourself, I think boundaries are so important, and not everyone understands boundaries. Boundaries are not a way to control other people. They're about knowing our limits and what we will and will not tolerate and being unapologetic about upholding them. I have let go of a lot of people, a lot of spaces and communities, a lot of clients and income streams because they weren't right for me, because they were harmful for me, even if they were good, lovely people. Toxicity doesn't mean that someone is toxic. It means that like the environment or interaction or dynamic is harmful for us. And again, only we can decide that. So having those boundaries, trusting ourselves to discern when we need them and to uphold them. And excuse me, really living intentionally. And I know that that can be very difficult in this world with the systems and the traumas and the chaos and we have to work to be able to pay our bills and do things we don't want sometimes, but really working intentionally in everything that you do to make sure that you're staying aligned with yourself as much as possible, to not just give up on your dreams and push them out to later, to not like diminish who you really are because it doesn't fit with everyone around you. Like be incredibly intentional in everything that you do, everything that you have in your space, everything that you think and say and put into your body or consume in some way. And just the more intentional that we are, the more present we are. And the easier it is, more easeful, I should say, to start aligning with better people and opportunities, and to be able to create, to find the possibilities and pathways to create what it is that we want.
I absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for speaking from such authentic space with such openness and sharing your story for others to know that there is light beyond this trauma, whatever kind of trauma we go through. Where can people find out a bit more about you, Stephenie?
You can head over to stepheniezamora.com. I spell my name special, Stephenie, and that's where you can find anything that you would want to find on me. You can access books, programs, all the good stuff.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to meet you and talk to you today. Thank you
you.
so much for all the wisdom you bring and you share with us, all the light that you spread in the world, all the goodness that comes with this positive, really positive outlook. It's absolutely amazing. Many thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing and the conversations you're having.